You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Hey everybody, Tristra here, your host for today's episode of Music Tectonics, the podcast where we go beneath the surface to understand what's shaking at the intersection of music and tech. Today we've got two really intriguing guests from Immersion Networks, a research-based audio technology company creating new ways for more people to enjoy deeper, more moving listening experiences on the headphones that they already own. I know, crazy concept, eh? All right, so today we have Paul Hubert, who is founder of Immersion Networks and a prolific inventor in the audio world. Paul has tackled everything from how to make mastering work better to how to make satellite radio sound better. We also have Jim Rondinelli, who has a long list of studio credits and fancy various metal records, the metallic things that you hang on the wall to his name, for his work as an engineer and producer. They're here today to share their insights into perceptual audio, and don't worry, we'll talk about what exactly that is in just a second, listening experience, and how music tech can evoke emotion and powerful stories in listeners. So thanks so much for joining me, Paul and Jim. I'm really, really excited to get to talk to both of you today. And I know from previous conversations how much interesting stuff you know and have to say about how we perceive sound and how that sound gets translated in our brains to music. So, Paul, would you mind kicking us off by telling us a little bit about your really interesting background in audio?
Well, sure. Happy to dig in. So I'm going to start with today and then work backwards a little bit, which always is a little bit easier. So today we are working on psychoacoustic models and very advanced stuff in how we hear sound and how we can create it and distribute it through the current ecosystem that's out there. So we don't have to go out and buy a bunch of new hardware. And it's been a big challenge for us. So prior to this project, which we'll always spend a lot of time talking about today, I was a founder of a company called Neural Audio, and we did a bunch of signal processing things for audio, trying to make codecs sound better. Also came up with a surround sound format that is still the standard for sports broadcast distribution. So we could take 5.1 audio, put it down into a stereo feed that has a lovely watermark inside the audio that helps. If you encode it 5.1, it goes down to stereo, comes back out to a decoder where it sees that watermark and expands it back out to a discrete 5.1. So something I came up with a really amazing team at Neural back in the early mid 2000s on there. So I sold that company in 2009. And prior to that, I had a very interesting group in studios where I did mastering, restoration, thousands and thousands of projects. I did mastering for one of the large labels. I did just about every single that came through a label in about a 10-year time period. So if I was to put my platinum records on the wall and my gold records on the wall, I wouldn't have enough wall space in the house to cover them. So it's kind of crazy on that side. And prior to me getting into audio, I was a computer researcher at Apple, where I started very young. I was hired when I was a young teen by Steve himself, and that's an interesting story all on its own. What we're here to talk about today.
Save it for our Steve Jobs memory lane episode. But Jim, tell me a bit about some of the work you did in music as an engineer and producer.
Hey, Tristra. Thanks for having me. So, let's see. Story of my life condensed into less than a couple minutes. This is sort of the third stop in my career in music and technology. First part of my career was spent producing and mixing records, and I was fortunate enough to get to work with a lot of great artists. Matthew Sweet, Wilco, Weezer, the Jayhawks, Everclear, the Tragically Hip, the Odds, Sloan. Fortunate to get to work with a bunch of great artists. But I started to become concerned when in the late 90s, I could see that the emergence of bandwidth in everybody's home was going to really change the way music was distributed and all media was distributed. And I made a conscious decision to walk away from a pretty solid career at that point to get a better handle on the backbone of digital distribution and how it would play out in media. So, first stop was thanks to an introduction from Ted Waite, the founder of Gateway, who is a friend from college, who I'd go on to work for a little bit later. First stop was mp3.com, where I originally started doing business development. Then we IPO'd the company in July of 1999, and ultimately started working in music licensing at MP3 as MP3 started to engage in a more positive manner with rights holders around the world. From MP3, after a brief stop back in the family office for Ted, who I mentioned earlier, looking after music tech investments, I got recruited to run the digital business for Warner Chappell Music Publishing, which was an interesting time because when I was there, 2005 and 2006, the music publishing business wasn't really ready to embrace digital distribution. In fact, it caused them fits. A lot of the older school executives associated digital distribution of music with piracy, and the line executives who were in charge of things like royalty accounting and the finance people were all freaked out because instead of dealing with 9.1 cent royalties, they're now dealing with fractions of a penny in royalties, and none of the systems were built to account for it, and it created a real problem for those guys. So I helped out sort out some of those problems for them and got them on the path to the digital transformation of their business. But at one point, I just realized I'd be happier back in the tech world. So that led to a continuation of work licensing music for a bunch of different music services. And ultimately that meant running all things content licensing and reporting for Rdio, which was a music service that operated in 87 countries before it was sold to Pandora at the end of 2015. Shortly after that, my friend Ed Pearson, who was my general counsel at Warner Chappell Music Publishing, but today it has a great law practice based here in the Pacific Northwest that looks after great artists like Macklemore and Ryan Lewis and The Head and the Heart and, any number of amazing Ben from Death Cab, any number of great artists out here. Ed met the people from Immersion Networks, immediately made the connection, thought it would be an interesting place. I met the founders through him, and when Paul Hubert first played the even early stage demos of what became now the mix³ platform, I was just blown away. Blown away to the point that I kind of dropped everything else I was doing. I had a number of consulting clients and got them all situated with other people and moved my family up here to the Pacific Northwest to be a part of the company. And these days, I'm lucky enough to get to do some immersive mixes now and then with artists that I love. But really the core of my job is to look after the core operation of the business here at Immersion.
Excellent. Thanks. Those are both really formidable and intriguing careers. So I'm excited to hear more about how you're thinking about audio. And specifically, let's talk a bit about this concept of perceptual audio or psychoacoustics. What are these fields? Why do they matter? Don't I just hear what I hear, right? Sound is an objective phenomenon. Don't I just hear stuff and then it's there?
It really is about how humans perceive sound, and that's all we really want to focus on. There's a lot of companies that spend a lot of time measuring, what signal processing can measure or what a microphone can get. With our background, especially our chief scientist, James D. Johnston, we all call him JJ. He's really the key person in all of the research that we've done with perceptual audio, since he's the primary inventor of codecs in the field. He did a mountain full of research at Bell Labs in his 26 years there about building codecs and reducing what actually matters to human hearing, and having that legacy within our team. We went on a different path of what you could throw out in a codec is to what can you keep inside a acoustic experience, or the way to make something feel that you're present. So we focused on really all that matters to human hearing, and having the foremost expert in the field as our main scientist behind it was really a wonderful journey.
Can we talk a little bit about some key moments of perception? There are things we live every day, but we don't realize that. For instance, I remember you bringing up earlier, Paul, was the fact that visual information and audio information are processed through the same channels in the brain. So looking at, like, for instance, a red speaker wire will make you associate it with a quote unquote warmer sound, that kind of interesting thing. So can you give us like a quick overview of the most important moments in perception and how they influence our listening experiences?
Well, I think you certainly got the right point that everything that we do as humans is integrated. The most unique thing about why we experience the world different than many other animals or anything is we have incredible sensory integration, and we can't turn it off. Is one thing is that our brain will perceive what we see and what we hear together at the same time and make a decision about the world around us. And obviously smell and taste and touch and all those other things are all at the same time. But in this realm of entertainment, we really just think about sight and sound and what those two things mean to each other. In our case, as we make spatial audio, things that are around you that give you a sense of near and far and up and down and distance and all of that, you can trick somebody by placing something in front of them, and if they don't see it, they're going to perceive it as behind them until they get some training that you kind of got to shut your eyes or kind of isolate that sense before you can really do that. So there's a large group of the world that if you play audio that sounds perfect in front of them, they can't actually hear it. They think it's behind them, even though it's clearly meant to be in front of them, and their brain will say, well, I don't see it, so I can't hear it in front of me. It will be behind us. That's called the cone of confusion for a lot of audio teams. And we've focused really hard on making sure there's enough cues for somebody to just initially shut their eyes and they can hear it in front of them, and eventually their brain will connect it that, I actually do have sound in front of me that's not. That's very different than how it sounds when it's behind you. So when you have something that goes around somebody's head, it sounds much duller and darker in the back and brighter in the front, and there's several things that can work in that favor. But initially people have a very difficult time separating what they see and what they hear. Also, in listening tests with things, if you actually are clicking on a selection where you control A or B, actually you clicking on that forces a preference. There is no way to so you anticipate whatever you're doing, but our hearing loop is reset the minute that you touch something and make a selection. So the only way to really tell the difference between two things is to do a blind listening between an A and a B, where there's something that randomly picks the two of them, and then you can identify this is A or this is B versus someone controlling that. And that's a lesson I learned as a mastering engineer many years ago, that I would trick myself into thinking that A is what I'm working on, so it must be better than B. But the only way to be truly objective about it is to have it random and you identify which one it is. So there's a bunch of things that our brain can't separate. And, that's one thing about system integration that we have to pay attention to.
That is wild. So how do you translate these kind of wild and crazy observations about the incredibly complex human brain and into a tech product that could be, that's available to consumers? How do you guys go about bridging that gap between things people could use and these incredible observations about human perception?
Well, the first ingredient is to have a J.J. Johnston around. I mean, J.J. is the world's foremost expert at perceptual audio. I mean, the guy's named in something like 200 plus patents. He's received two Lifetime Achievement Awards for his work in signal processing and at the dawn of digital audio. And, he's gone through decades and decades and decades of research from the very beginning of uh, digital audio, and understands human hearing processes intimately, because it's really an art as well as a science, right? There's a lot of creativity involved in actually coming up with the techniques that we use to do what we do. So having a JJ and having a Paul helps. Then adding in Paul's experience in signal processing and coming up with real world solutions for audio that have strong business outcomes helps a lot as well. But at the end of the day, this is all super, super complex math. And we're using processing capabilities that, weren't even conceived 30 years ago when the basic math for the codecs that are more popular, or most popular for the delivery of music, were created. So let me frame this up for you in another way. Since the dawn of digital music, we've been listening to the MP3 file and the AAC file. Both were designed to reduce file sizes so you could put music more easily over a digital network or store more audio files on a device. Neither of them were designed to make things sound better or different. And if you go back to the amount of computer processing horsepower that was available back in the early 90s when JJ published the first papers on AAC, I mean, hell, my iPhone is almost a supercomputer of that era, right? So there are things that we can do in our processes now that those guys couldn't even conceive of back then. There's just simply wasn't enough computing horsepower in the world to pull it off. So we've taken years and years and years, decades of, the aggregate of tens to hundreds of millions of dollars of learnings from audio research and poured them into a platform. And now we deliver that whole experience via a set of creation tools that are available on the cloud for anybody on any web-connected computer to use to create three-dimensional audio. The world's changed a lot.
Maybe to expand on that point a little bit is we're really borrowing from the future by using so much computation power. And, initially when we were designing this, we were thinking, how are we designed it in the labs with no compromises. What's the best thing we could do? And then you always try and figure out, okay, now how we could build this into the market. And the computation power that was required to it was tremendous. So we thought maybe we have to build a studio product that's got, really very powerful customized hardware that can run on this stuff. But, maybe there's maybe a few hundred studios that could afford to purchase it, but it would be the most amazing sounding thing ever. It would be the best mixer or the best tool set. And then we had a couple experts on our team that really understood cloud computing, and we decided to, instead of making expensive hardware for the custom studio, we decided to leverage the power of the cloud and have, ultimately unlimited computer power at our hands. So we didn't have to compromise the sound of what we're building, and we could just deliver it to people, with a web connection. So all that's happening is all the processing's done, and we have access to millions of cores of computing power. Everybody gets to rent a little bit at a time, but all they have to do is have a clean stream come back to them, since we can deliver this as 2 channels of audio. Since we deliver it back as lossless audio, there's really no compromise in the production flow. There's a little bit of a delay because of the internet connection, but it's less than a half of a second in most cases.
And this is kind of the interesting thing, right? Because some of the most common questions we get asked are, well, how does it play with my current Pro Audio workstation, Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton, whatever. And what we have to educate people on is that the things that we're doing in the cloud are not going to be available computationally to any of those platforms for probably 10 to 15 years because processing power just isn't there. We can throw so many cores simultaneously to task in the cloud, and that allows us to do things that are just, inconceivable to anything else. The other thing about this is if you're a recording studio or a musician, you want to move into the future, you want to move into immersive audio. In other systems, they're asking you to buy all new speakers, redo your control room, make a CapEx investment of tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars for your facility for formats that are still based on crappy compressed audio. I mean, none of the codecs that are used to deliver Atmos or MPEG-H were specifically designed for multi-channel or spatial audio. They are extensions of other pools of IP that happen to be around the facility that these guys are using. So what's the outcome? The outcome is we're trying to tell people that we're creating a new next-gen audio experience, and with some of the other platforms in market, they're doing it via really mediocre compressed audio. That's a shame. Sometimes it can work. A lot of times it doesn't. On top of it, 70% plus of music now is consumed on headphones, in your office, in the subway, in your car, listening at your home while you're on a device. Somebody else is in another room on another device, as opposed to the old big multi-channel stereo speaker idea that people went 2 years ago. If people are listening on headphones, we should be delivering things to them that are optimized to work in 2 channels, not 20 channels dumbed down so it fits within a 2-channel delivery system and is dumbed down and compressed and has conflicts to it. You should deliver it as a stereo file to their headphones. And if you can do that and deliver 3 dimensions, you can make an audio experience that's available and accessible to everyone. And to us, that's the point. Accessible to everyone on the hardware that they already own. I don't care if they're listening in the Senegal, where there's maybe only a 3G network that's available in their community, or if they're listening in Helsinki, where there's incredible mobile bandwidth. They should be able to get a great and robust experience. That's what moving technology is about. That's what the future is about. And we think we're uniquely positioned to be able to deliver that value proposition to people.
That's fantastic. Let's jump back to the creator side of things. You were mentioning studio work and DAWs and all that fun stuff. How do you guys imagine this will change from a creative point of view, the way audio engineers, producers, mastering engineers, recording artists work in the studio? Will there be new creative possibilities? How do you imagine that?
Well, the first thing is, on some level, and Paul can kind of speak to the origin story of this, but on some level, we want to give the storyteller, whether the storyteller is a songwriter or a filmmaker or a podcaster, a tool to be able to bring the listener into the space and into the performance that the storyteller wants to prescribe for the listener. We're not depending on an array of speakers and amplifiers in a room to create a so-called spatial effect. We're delivering a 3D rendering of an environment that was chosen by the storyteller to portray that story. It's almost akin to what happens with computer animation and an actor's performance. An actor may act in front of a green screen entirely disaggregated from the environment that the storyteller wants them in, but the storyteller in Hollywood wants them in front of a waterfall, inside a car, inside a bar, but they're still all in front of a green screen. So we give people the creative ability to do that. Most importantly, we give you the ability to make it sound like you are there at that performance, and so it feels very real. It's not just about sound. It's about feeling and conveying emotion. And that's something that we feel that this program and this approach does better than anything else.
That's great points, Jim, on that side. One of the things that I've always wanted to push in this platform is, I've been privileged to sit in front of some amazing instruments and amazing acoustics. I've sat in a mastering chair for 20 plus years, and the saddest thing is it. Whatever comes out of there, once we finish the product, it never is going to sound that good again. The artist, it never gets to hear it like that in a perfect acoustic environment on, really well balanced speakers and all of these things. The whole point behind this platform is you put everything you want into the actual mix itself, and it stays there. You can put the final room that you're in, you can put the space and the placement of your virtual sources or your microphone feeds or any of those things, so you control the entire distance, the effect, everything. And you're not limited to mixing everything on. If we had a stage in front of us, we've been mixing where everybody's on the drum riser and a few things are off to the side of the stage, but they sound weird if they're not in the middle. They don't sound as full and rich and all those things. With our system, we do a very advanced acoustic simulation, and things sound just as they would in a room. The drum set sounds wonderful, whether it's on the left side of you or the right side of you. You can move, you can turn, you could do all of these things. All the instruments sound incredible on their own. We've just opened the sound stage to infinite possibilities and direction and distance. And you really couldn't do any of that stuff with the traditional tools out there.
Yeah, and not a defined set of points. Like we're not mapping to a set of 7 points on top and 7 in the middle and a subwoofer. We're not defining those points like that. As Paul mentioned, it's continual space, continual motion, not defined places. And when you move a sound with our tool from any point, from any origin to any destination point, the tonal balance of that sound does not change. And if you've ever heard somebody try to work with some of the other systems and move something that has, in particular, decent low frequency energy in it, it tanks when you try to move it around. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, no, it never has the feeling or punch of even what a traditional stereo would have. Stereo still sounds better than most of these other formats. We're opening that door entirely, that it sounds better, and you can put stereo paired to the left of you, above you, over to the right. The biggest thing is you can also move things in the space, as Jim said, without any consequences in sound. It's not going to have phase cancellation as it moves from one zone to the other. It's completely smooth, it's uniformed, and it's a very advanced simulation, as we say. That it's really high level detail, and we're using lots of processing power to make sure it's seamless all the time.
Yeah, we're going into a new generation of audio, and look, audio has been kind of the neglected media for the last, let's just say, since the dawn of the iPhone. If I just think about it, we went from video of 525 lines to 1080 to 4K. We want up through all these different encoding formats, H262, 263, 264, etc. And audio is still living inside the 128K MP3, maybe 256K AAC, both of which are imperfect, and people can hear and feel the difference. So we are happy that people are now finally thinking about audio, but it was the acknowledgement of that got this company started several years ago as a research project to give audio a chance to catch up as an experience to the tremendous advances that have happened in video over the same time period. We think we've done a great job of bringing it closer. We're happy to see other people paying attention to audio in the space, but let's pick for the future, not do a patent extension on the IP that we just happen to have sitting on the shelf. And in that way, I feel like it's an indictment of a lot of the audio industry that the approach that they've taken has been, well, we have this patent pool. It's kind of like the pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceutical guys will we have a patent on this drug. Oh, let's do the extended release version. We can charge more for it. Doesn't make the medicine more efficacious. It might make it easier to take, but it's still the same molecule. That's the research approach that's been taken by most of the audio industry up to this point. It's not new. It's just 23 channels of the same stuff. That's disappointing. That's not innovation. And that's not the future.
Wow, that's a really thoughtful yet quite striking indictment of the way I think all of us have been sold audio experiences as somehow connected to a piece of hardware, right? That there's a sort of hardware fetish that you have to put in the special niche or something in order to unlock the magic of an audio experience. And I love that you're proposing that we could hear things differently without all of that hardware, that outlay of expense and all that for us consumers.
It's not just expense. It's also, there's an environmental consequence to this as well that we damn well ought to be thoughtful of. Every artist that I know of, with the exception of a couple of people in country who I love and have differing opinions with, but every artist that I'm close with cares about what happens to this planet and cares about resource capacity and cares about energy consumption. So the thing about this platform is we're not asking you to go out and manufacture new speakers and power amplifiers. That's great business for the guys selling, or women selling the speakers and power amps. Maybe not so good for the rest of the planet. Maybe not so good for the people who live near the wells where the petroleum is extracted to make the plastics that are used in the speaker cones. Maybe not so good for the people who live near the rare earth mines that are used for magnets of these things. Maybe not so good for a lot of the planet. But the other thing about this is energy consumption. So one of the things about this platform is we can deliver our immersive experience over the codecs that are already in market, so services don't need to change their back end. But we actually have built and available for deployment additional transmission mechanisms in our own codecs that are much more energy efficient and can significantly reduce the environmental footprint of any audio streaming service, whether they are a music service or music on top of video. They lower bandwidth, they lower storage, they lower energy consumption radically. And that has a huge implication for the environmental footprint of the whole ecosystem. And that's something that I would certainly like to see people paying more thought to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Paul and Jim, for that huge sort of whirlwind tour of everything behind your new audio format. I will make sure we have a bunch of information for listeners in the show notes so they can hear the difference between Immersion Networks versions and standard stereo version. So we'll link to your demo page in short, Paul and Jim. And we'll also let you know how you can try mix³, which is the cloud platform that Paul and Jim were talking about yourself if you are a creator and want to experiment with spatial audio. So thanks so much for joining me, guys. This was fascinating, and I really appreciate all your time and insights.
Well, thank you very much for having us. And of course, our best wishes to Dimitri, and we hope that you recover soon.
They're joking because they see my name as Dimitri on our podcasting platform. So, yeah. Anyway, thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks for having us. All right.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Do you have your ticket to the Music Tectonics Conference? I'm planning this event for you, podcast listeners. The Music Tectonics team is organizing keynotes, panels, and networking with music tech innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, and deep thinkers. And I would love to see you there. But time's running out to get a special early bird rate at musictectonics.com. If you lock in your conference ticket before August 3rd, you'll pay just $69. That's a pretty great price to pay for 3 experiences. Online, in the universe, and on a carousel by the sea. Mix and match to get a conference experience like no other. One ticket gets you access to online events October 25th through October 27th and in-person events outdoors by the sea in Los Angeles on November 2nd. That's 3 mornings online with keynotes, interactive panels, and speed networking on Hopin's video conference but better platform, and 3 afternoons in the metaverse with keynotes, instrument demos, exhibitor booths, and chance meetings in Degi World, the avatar-based conference campus, no VR headset required. Then, one day in Los Angeles of in-person networking and real-world spaces way beyond the typical conference hotel. Bring that stack of business cards that's been gathering dust. You're going to need them. Don't wait any longer and get your early bird ticket now at musictectonics.com before the price goes up. Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We put out new episodes every week. Want more? Find it at musictectonics.com. You can dig deeper into this episode, learn about our annual conference, get the Music Tectonics app, and sign up for our newsletter. musictectonics.com has it all. Also, look for Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Clubhouse. And connect with me, Dimitri Vitsa, on LinkedIn. Peace.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.